Brother Muhammad, did you start the recording, inshallah?
Yes, we're going to start now, inshallah. We've recorded.
Inshallah.
Barakallahu feekum. Whenever you're ready, Shaykhana.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين ورحمة الله للعالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. All the praise and all the glory is due to Allah, and I bear witness that there is no God worthy of being worshipped but Allah, and that Muhammad is his last prophet and messenger. May the blessings and peace of Allah be upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and those who followed his path up to the day of the judgment. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our second session in explaining the hadiths of Umdat al-Ahkam. Umdat al-Ahkam is a book which is designed to elaborate the authentic ahadith on legal rulings. To remind ourselves of this goal is to train ourselves on how to use the texts of ahadith in or as a legal evidence. Hadith under discussion reads as follows. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يقبل الله صلاة أحدكم إذا أحدث حتى يتوضأ. On the authority of Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, who said, the Messenger of Allah said, Allah does not accept the prayer of one in hadath until he renews his wudu. This hadith, as you see on the title, that it talks about the prayer, or its title is, the prayer is not accepted without one being in a state of purification. So it discusses basically one of the important conditions of validity for a prayer. In order to be valid, the prayer have to get certain conditions. Number one, the time of prayer must be on. Number two, the person making prayer must be in state of purity from both major ritual impurity, which is janaba, and minor ritual impurity, which is uplifted by wudu. Also, the place and the clothes must be clean and pure. Number four, turning one's face to the Qibla. These are the basic conditions for the validity of prayer. So the compiler is discussing one of them, which is the importance or the condition that the person performing prayer must be in a complete state of ritual purity. So this ritual purity, we have two types of purities. There is a physical purity and ritual purity. Physical means that a person doesn't have on his body any traces of blood or urine, etc. This is urine or blood. This is a physical impurity. This is najasa. But when a person, for example, passes a wind So he is in a state of ritual impurity. We call it ritual impurity because this impurity is only known by the lawgiver. It's only known by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not real and physical impurity that you have on your body. So even when you are making wudu, for example, you don't actually wash things which have been solid or polluted. You wash your hands and your face and you wipe over your head, though it may be clean actually. This is a reason that it is an act of worship. This is called ritual purity or ritual impurity. Uh, Al-Hadath has been discussed by Abu Huraira in another version of this hadith. He explained the meaning of the word hadath, hadath, which we translated as ritual impurity. When Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the prayer of someone afflicted with hadath is not valid until he renews his ablution. A man from Hadramaut asked Abu Hurairah, what is hadath? And Abu Hurairah answered him back by saying, breaking wind silently or with a sound. So if I ask you a question, passing a wind is just only one aspect of hadath, right? It's one of the reasons which invalidate a person's wudu. But a person may invalidate his wudu by urinating, for example, by passing a wind, by defecating, and by some other things, which may, by touching a woman, according to uh, certain scholars. So these are the invalidators of hadith. But Abu Huraira in this hadith, he just gave one example of the hadith. And hadith may be hadathun akbar or hadath asghar, as you know in fiqh. And al-hadath al-akbar is a major ritual impurity, which is janaba, for example, when a person have a wet dream or he has a sexual intercourse, or for women when they have their menstruation period, or when they are in a state of after having nifas or after birth blood. So these are the things which necessitates and requires a ghusl, a full ghusl, and this is called major ritual impurity. What we are talking about here is the minor ritual impurity. So what are the basic jurisprudence or rules that we can deduce from this hadith? First of all, the Prophet ﷺ said, the prayer of someone in hadith is not valid until he renews his ablution. What we can deduce from this statement? We can easily deduce, look, the Prophet ﷺ said, is not valid until. So the Prophet ﷺ made the condition for the validity of one's prayer that that person has a valid wudu, right? So the scholars concluded that ritual purity is a condition for the validity of prayers. Look how the Prophet ﷺ used this phrase, the word prayer. The word prayer is called in Arabic or in usul al-fiqh, it's called am. What is the meaning of am? The word am here refers to all types of prayers. Everything which is called a prayer have the same ruling. So either it is obligatory prayer, it is supererogatory prayer, which is nafl, it is a funeral prayer, even it is a sujood after reciting the Quran. You know, when we recite certain occasions or verses of the Quran, we have to make, it is recommended actually to make sujood. Or to make sujood on praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you receive a bounty from Allah. So all those practices are included in the term prayer. They are called prayers. So all of them require what? All of them, they require a person to have a state of ritual purity, which means that he has to get a full wudu, a valid wudu. If a person doesn't have a valid wudu, so according to the statement of this hadith, his prayer is invalid. If a person makes salah and after finishing his salah, he discovered that he did not perform ablution for sure. So he has to make up this prayer again. Why? Because the prayer is deficient of one of the basic conditions of its validity. This is all deduced from the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. The prayer of someone in hadith is not valid until he renews his wudu. So the Prophet ﷺ used the word prayer and he used the word someone in its general sense, which means that it's applicable to everyone and it's applicable for every prayer. Number two, the scholars have unanimously agreed that performing ablution before prayer is a recommended act of worship. Uh, it means that here there is, I think there is a word which must be added to this text, which is jurists have unanimously agreed that performing ablution before praying is obligatory. It is obligatory, but they disagreed on the performance when we should perform ablution. When exactly should we perform ablution for prayer? When it is obligatory to perform ablution? Is it once a person loses his state of ritual impurity, or when a person stands up for prayer when he is in need for this ablution? The correct view among scholars is that a person's ablution becomes obligatory when he stands up for making prayers, when he is ready for making prayers. Why? Because this is explicitly mentioned in the ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق. This is ayah number 6 of Surah Al-Ma'idah. Ayah number 4, I think, of Surah Al-Ma'idah. So this ayah basically talks about the rituals of wudu. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started by saying, when you intend to make prayers, you have to make ablution. So making ablution becomes obligatory when a person stands up for prayer. But making wudu and maintaining your state of ritual purity all the time is a recommended act of worship. And it is even, it has been reported according to the authentic hadith of Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam heard his footsteps in Jannah. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, okay, it is ayah 6, jazakallah khair. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam heard his footsteps in Jannah. So the Prophet ﷺ asked him, why? What is the act that you think is the most expected act that draws you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And you think that it may be the reason for what you do. So the Prophet, he answered the Prophet ﷺ back by saying, I have never ever made ablution, but I followed it with 2 rak'ats. These are the rak'at of Tawbah. According to another version, that Abu Bilal radiallahu ta'ala, he used to maintain wudu. And it's also confirmed in the other hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam recommended a person to maintain his wudu by saying, وَلَا يُحَافِظُ عَلَى الْوُضُوءِ إِلَّا مُؤْمِنٌ. No, it's only a believer, a true sincere believer, a devout believer who maintains his state of purity or wudu. And the scholars explain this last hadith by saying that حافظ لا يحافظ على الوضوء means that he punctually making wudu or in a perfect way. Another point that we also should discuss in this hadith is, according to the majority of Muslim scholars, one cannot perform more than one obligatory prayer after performing tayammum. There is a difference between tayammum and wudu, and we will discuss it inshallah later. because the scholars said that tayammum is a replacement of wudu. And it doesn't replace wudu in all of its characteristics or aspects. At the beginning of the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba had to renew their wudu each time they make a prayer. But this has been abrogated by the conquest of Mecca when the Prophet ﷺ offered more than one prayer by the same ablution. So it was abrogated with regard to ablution, to wudu, but it was not for tayammum. So when a person performs tayammum, according to the majority of the Muslim scholars, he can make tayammum only for one prayer, for one obligatory prayer and its adjacent or and its nawafil. If he would like to make another obligatory prayer, he has to make tayammum again. This same rule, as you see, is not applicable to wudu, as I mentioned to you. The third point that we can deduce from this hadith, my brothers and sisters, is that according to the Hanafi scholars, they have something strange. You know what's it? They said, the Hanafi said, if a person loses his wudu after finishing tashahhud, after finishing the recitation of his tashahhud, tahiyyatul mubarakatul salawat, and before making the final salutation to end his prayer, so he passed the wind after finishing tashahhud and before making the taslim. They said that his prayer is valid and there is no problem with him. You know, what is the reason? Al-Ahnaf, they based their view. They based their view on the fact that the taslim, according to them, is not obligatory. It is not a pillar, it's not a rukn. It's not a part and parcel of prayer. It's not a part or parcel of prayer. Which means that if a person doesn't make taslim, his prayer is still valid. You understand what I'm saying? And it doesn't affect the whole validity of the prayer. So the prayer technically ends by the recitation or by the end of the tashahhud. Can I ask you a question, my brothers and sisters? If we read this hadith, according to the text of this hadith, does it comply to the Hanafi scholars or not? Does it comply with the Hanafi scholars or not? No. Why? Why it doesn't comply with the Hanafi view here? Because the Prophet ﷺ made a condition. Exactly. So the Prophet ﷺ, as Brother Razak said, that the Prophet ﷺ made here a condition for the validity of prayer. That if a person passes a wind in the middle of his prayer, and this is regarded, still he is in the middle of his prayer. Why? Because there is another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ which he described salah by saying, تحريمها التكبير وتحليلها التسليم. What does it mean? The Prophet ﷺ means here that starting the salah commences by takbir and the salah ends with taslim. So the end to taslim is a part and parcel of salah. And this is the reason that if a person passes a wind or he loses his state of ritual impurity, he has to make the prayer again. If you have any questions on this hadith, I would like to hear from you. We can dedicate it just 3 minutes for questions, inshallah. You can use the microphone if you like, brothers and sisters. No questions? Okay. Wa alaikum salam.
You said that the salah ends with takbir and ends with taslim, and in the hadith. So if that's the case, why do the Hanafis say that taslim is not a obligatory part of the prayer?
And the Hanafis methodology, they have their own method of classifying the acts of prayer into rukn and wajib. Into they differentiate between the rukn and the wajib. So according to them, if you miss a wajib, your prayer is still valid. To give you an example, the Hanafi scholars, and then we will study it inshallah in usul al-fiqh. But for example, the Hanafi scholars, they say, if a person doesn't recite Surah Al-Fatiha and he is just reciting a number of verses of the Quran in his prayer, is it sufficient and efficient? According to them, yes, it would be actually, it will be valid and legally valid. Why? Because they believe in the ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَقَرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنْهُ. And the relationship between the Quran and the Sunnah with regard to the acts of prayer, the Hanafi, they have their own way of differentiating between a rukn and a wajib. You understand what I'm saying? So this is the reason that they regarded taslim not as a rukn, not as a constituent element. Moreover, the Hanafi, I think they relied on a version of the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You remember the story of the person who did his prayer wrongly, al-musi salatahu, the one who came and prayed in front of the Prophet. So the Prophet instructed him to make prayers properly, because he said to him, return back because you did not really pray in the correct way. So according to one of the versions of this hadith, the taslim is not mentioned there, of the things that that person was supposed to follow. And also the Hanafi, they do not make the condition of tranquility, of reposing in each single act of prayer. You notice that actually when you travel to Pakistan or to any place, you see that they sometimes they pray very fast. You see that? Basically because they don't think that the sakina, or what you can call reposing or tranquility in each single act of prayer, is a condition. Why? Because they base themselves on the hadith of the person who, on this al-musi salatahu, because the Prophet ﷺ did not mention that in the version which was related by the Hanafi scholars. You understand what I'm saying? This is, so it is a methodological perspective.
Jazakallahu khair.
Yeah. So the third hadith of the Prophet the third hadith is the hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. عن عبد الله بن عمرو بن العاص وأبي هريرة وعائشة رضي الله عنهم قالوا قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ويل للأعقاب من النار. On the authority of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, Abu Huraira and Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anhum, who said that the Messenger of Allah said, torment for the fire of hell will be on the heels, will be on the heels. This hadith has been reported by Bukhari and Muslim, but there is another version of Bukhari and Muslim which clarify the occasion in which the Prophet ﷺ issued this hadith. It is reported that Abdullah ibn Amr said, the Prophet dropped behind us and on a journey, and he reached us at Asr while we were performing ablution for the Asr prayer, which was overdue, and wiped over our feet without washing them. So he called out in his loudest voice, torment for the fire of hell will be in the heels. He said it twice or thrice. And according to the other version of Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ saw a man performing wudu without washing his heels. So he said, torment for the fire of hell will be upon the heels. So the Prophet ﷺ, first of all, the word wail in Arabic language, it means distress or affliction. And some of the scholars say that the wail is a valley in the hellfire, which is given for people who do certain mistakes and certain crimes, as it is repeated in many of the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The word al-a'qab, waylun lil-a'qab, it can be interpreted to mean affliction will be on the heels from the fire of hell, or affliction from the fire of hell will be upon the people whose heels are not properly washed. So this expression in Arabic language may be interpreted to have a type of ellipsis, like because the aqab or the heels are not to be punished by themselves, but the people who did not make proper wudu are the ones who are supposed to have this problem. Okay, I think I missed that. The first legal ruling that can be deduced from this hadith is deduced from the saying affliction from the fire of hell will be on heels. What we see in this expression that the Prophet ﷺ threatens certain people of a certain punishment. When you find out a threatening in the context of the Quran or in the context of hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, so you make sure that this is what it is a prohibited act. So a person should not draw closer and a person should not commit. This threatening, so this is the default rule. If you find the threatening, especially a severe threatening of entering the hellfire, so it is an indication that this act is not permissible. It is not even disliked. It is prohibited. It's absolutely prohibited. And you cannot turn this prohibition into a lesser degree. What is the lesser degree of prohibition? The lesser degree is karaha, which is being disliked. You cannot turn it to be disliked unless you have a valid evidence, another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which justify its doing. So here in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ threatened them of receiving a portion of atonement or punishment in the hellfire. So this is a clear indication that leaving a part of the foot unwashed is prohibited. Therefore, the scholars maintain that it's obligatory to wash the feet and heels fully for ablution. So we have actually different approaches with regard to feet. You know that the Shia, they just satisfy themselves by just wiping over the feet. Wiping over the feet without having socks or leather boots. They don't wash. They don't make full wash of the feet, but they just they wipe over. And wiping over the feet, it has its certain conditions, and this has been explained in a concession or in a rukhsa that the Prophet ﷺ has provided for his ummah, according to the authentic hadith of Safwan ibn Assal and the hadith of al-Mughirah ibn Shu'bah and the hadith also of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhum that we will explain later inshallah. But from the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does he say? يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة, O you who believe, when you stand up for making prayers, فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق, wash your hands up to the elbows. And then فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق, wash your faces and your hands up to the elbows. وامسحوا برؤوسكم, and then he says wipe over your برؤوسكم. So what is the grammatical case of وامسحوا برؤوسكم, the word رؤوسكم? Is it in the accusative? Is it in the nominative? Is it in the dative? I'm asking you, my brothers, expert in grammar. It is majrur. Excellent. So it's فامسحوا بوجوهكم وأي فامسحوا برؤوسكم. Okay, this is majrur. And then Allah subhanahu, and what about wujuhakum? Wujuhakum is, it is in the genitive, in the accusative, it is in the nominative, it is mansub, it's accusative, right? That's why we have a fatha. تغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم وأيديا. So it is maftuh. But when Allah talked about wiping, He made it what? He made it majroor. After mentioning the wiping of the head, what Allah says? وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ. So أرجلكم is what? It is in the mansub or in the majroor? It is
منصوب.
it is what? It is in the mansub. So it should follow the way of making the mansub. What is the mansub? We mentioned that this is the face and the hands, right? So it must be washed like the face and the hand, right? This is the conclusion here. And if we have another reading of the Quran which makes it in majrur, but anyhow, we still have a very strong proof on the necessity of washing the feet, which is, what is this? It is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and the practice of the Messenger ﷺ that he never ever made his wudu without washing his feet fully, except when the Prophet ﷺ had a leather boot, according to the hadith of al-Mughirah ibn Shu'bah, who wanted actually to take off the shoes for the Prophet ﷺ to wash his feet, but he said, no, leave them because I have entered them in a state of purity, so I'm going to wipe over them. So the Prophet ﷺ wiped over the shoes, wiped over the leather boots, but he did not wipe over the feet, according to what the Shia believe. That's why it is not actually. So whoever wipes over the feet, his wudu is invalid. Is invalid because the obligation here is to wash the feet fully. And there is another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said, when he performed, the Prophet ﷺ called for ablution, for water, and then washed his hands thrice until he washed his feet thrice. And then he said, this is how to perform ablution. Whoever increases or decreases on this is doing it incorrectly. فَمَنْ زَادَ أَوْ نَقَصَ فَقَدْ أَسَاءَ وَظَلَمَ. فَقَدْ أَسَاءَ وَظَلَمَ. So the general rule that we can deduce from this hadith is, it is obligatory to wash the limbs of ablution in full. So if a person leaves just a spot, like the spot of a coin, like the size of a coin, or like the size of a little meal, untouched with water, his wudu is what? His wudu is invalid. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, وَيْلٌ لِلْأَعْقَابِ مِنَ النَّارِ. So his wudu is invalid. Then here comes the question. If a person, like for example, noticed that while he is making prayer, a spot in his feet untouched with water, what does he do? What is supposed to do? He must actually leave prayer because his prayer is invalid. You understand what I'm saying? He must immediately leave prayer and then he goes. What does he do? Should he resume his ablution from the beginning, or he can just wash his feet? He just washes a part of his feet and washed according to the Shafi'i scholars. Why? Because the Shafi'i scholars, they did not stipulate, they did not require a consequent a consequent performance of ablution, which means that a continuous performance of ablution. You can wash a part of your body and then you can be busy with something and then return it back and make it later. No problem, as long as you have the same intention. You understand? So if you, for example, discover that the spot which was uncovered, which was untouched, is in your hands up to the elbows, how should you do? Who can you answer? Who can answer? If you discover that it is in your face or in your hands up to the elbows, according to the Shafi'i scholars, what should you do? Washes the
Just
area
watch that
only?
area.
No, but you have to make the wudu in order. You have to make the wudu in order because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that in the Quran. So you have to make tartib, exactly as Shahbaz said. So in this case, you have to make washing your hands, and then you wipe over your head, and then you make the ears, and afterwards you make what? You wash the feet. You understand what I'm saying? So you start from the place where you missed. You make it again, and then you do whatever follows, because this is how to make it. But if you are a Maliki, if you are following the Maliki madhab, so in this case you have to resume the whole prayer, the whole ablution again, because al-muwala is a constituent element. It is rukn in, or it is a shart in the validity of wudu. Okay, my brothers and sisters. Number two, it's obligatory to move the rings on fingers during washing the hands because it follows the same ruling that we mentioned. If you are afraid actually that water may touch the place, and I think the scholars differed about this issue, but the correct view or the preferred view in this occasion is the view of Imam Ahmad, that when you have the ring loose, so there is no problem because surely water will go through. And if it is tight, so in this case you have to move it to make sure that water reaches every single spot in your palms and in your hands. And Imam Ahmad based his view on the report that the Prophet ﷺ saw a man whose foot appeared to have a portion about the size of a fingernail which had not been touched by water. He then said, go back and perform your ablution properly. So the Prophet ﷺ only focused on the place which is untouched. So when a person makes sure that the whole of his hands will have water, so there is no problem at all. There is also a point here, my brothers and sisters, that the Prophet ﷺ addressed them in a loud voice, according to the authentic report. And Imam Ibn Hajar commented on this point by saying that it is permissible to raise one's voice when instructing someone. Like it's when you see that he's doing something haram, to show him that it is you are serious, and he must be serious actually, because the Prophet ﷺ was worried about them, and it was reported that it was not only one person, it were a number of people. So Ibn Battal maintained that it is similarly permissible to raise a voice in scholarly debates, and moreover, it is Prophet's practice to repeat his speech thrice if misunderstanding is possible. It is similarly recommended to repeat greetings thrice if the voice is not heard properly. This is the second hadith in today's session. Please, if you have any questions, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam.
Sheikh, so when you mentioned that the whole foot must be washed, do the between the toes as well? Is that a requirement for the validity of the wudu as well?
What do you say?
So when you say the whole foot must be washed, must the spaces between the toes also be washed?
Yes, for sure. For sure. Every single, because the feet includes all of its parts, from the toes up to the the joint between the feet and the leg. So it must be washed completely. But the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, you can actually have water running. But the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is to make takhleel. We call this takhleel. Takhleel is inserting a wet finger in between your toes to make sure that water reaches there. Now, and it has been reported according to in a hadith of Imam Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu that the Prophet ﷺ used to use his little index or his index finger in making takhleel. The index finger of the right hand for making takhleel of the left leg and vice versa.
Jazakallah.
Okay, any further questions? For any brother or sister, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate on raising that. I don't follow up the chat because I keep looking to the screen. So if you have any questions, you can raise it through the microphone, inshallah. Barakallah feek. If you feel comfortable.
Sheikh. Barakallahu feekum. I had a question regarding wudu ala wudu. Is there a reward for this? Like some people say there's a riwayah about it being compared to nur ala nur. But I've heard that some muhaddithin weakened those narrations.
Yes, the hadith, that's why I did not mention this riwayah, because it is weak. This riwayah is weak. But the renewing wudu has been proved by another report, which is authentic. And this is, I think it is reported in the 4 books of hadith, or in Tirmidhi at least, when the Prophet ﷺ was asked, أَنَتَوَضَّأُ مِنْ لُحُومِ الْإِبِلِ قَالَ نَعَمْ. Should we perform wudu after eating the meat of camel? He said yes. And then they asked him, should we make wudu after eating the meat of lamb? The Prophet ﷺ said, yes, if you like, or it is the Prophet ﷺ, if you wish. When the Prophet ﷺ expressed the word if you wish, this is, and according to the scholars of usul, it refers to the fact that this act is preferable or it is recommended, because it has been mentioned in the context of another hadith. You remember when the Prophet ﷺ informed them to offer 2 rak'ats between the adhan and the iqamah of Salatul Maghrib. So the Prophet ﷺ said that liman sha, for whomever wishes, for whoever wishes. So the renewing, the process of renewing wudu or making wudu on wudu is actually recommended according to the hadith that I have mentioned to you. And also maintaining a state of wudu all the time may be deduced from the other hadith. وَلَا يُحَافِظُ عَلَى الْوُضُوءِ إِلَّا مُؤْمِنٌ. And this is an authentic hadith, which means that only a sincere and devout believer who maintains his state of purity. And as I mentioned to you, that the interpretation of this hadith, the scholars differed in the interpretation of this hadith. Some of them said that to make or to yuhafiz ala al-wudu may be interpreted to mean to punctually perfect the wudu, or yuhafiz ala al-wudu means to maintain his state of ritual purity all the time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
Allah yazikh khair, Sheikh. Barakallahu feek.
The 4th hadith of Umdat al-Ahkam and the 3rd in our today's session is or reads as follows. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: إذا توضأ أحدكم فليجعل في أنفه ماء ثم لينتثر، ومن استجمر فليوتر، وإذا استيقظ أحدكم من نومه فليغسل يده فليغسل يديه قبل أن يدخلهما في الإناء ثلاثا فإن أحدكم لا يدري أين باتت يده. On the authority of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, when one of you performs ablution, he must inhale water into nose and then blow it out. And whoever uses stones to clean his private parts, he should use an odd number. Whenever one of you wakes up from sleep, he should wash his hands thrice before immersing them into the container. For no one knows where his hands were while he was slept. My brothers and sisters, this hadith, as you see the title here, is washing hands before immersing them into a container or a water container. The practice of the Sahaba, let me explain for you the background. And this background has been mentioned by Imam Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who said that the Sahaba ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim, they had scarcity in water. So mostly when after answering the call of nature, the Sahaba ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim, they used to clean themselves by using pebbles. So when they sleep, they may have sweat, and some of the traces of these najasas may actually be touched by their own hands, especially when they sleep. So, and they don't have faucets, taps to drink, so they usually had containers or vessels, and they used those containers for making wudu. So the Prophet ﷺ prohibited them from immersing their hands into those containers unless they first draw the container to wash their hands first. Because they don't know where their hands were during night, because it may touch some of the najasa, so they may pollute the whole water they are making wudu from. So the Sahaba, the scholars said that they differed about the legal ruling of this washing, and they mentioned it before wudu for a number of reasons. Number one, because actually some of the scholars said that this is one of the recommended acts of ablution of wudu, but actually this is not. It is washing hands. This is one of the duties of a person, of a Muslim, towards the vessel, towards the water that he uses for ablution, in order to keep this water clean and pure and purifying. A person should not touch it before actually washing his hands. Here, let us actually move to the legal rulings which may be deduced from this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, when one of you does ablution, he must inhale water into nose and then blow it. This is called madmada. So before talking about madmada, my brothers and sisters, you know that the obligatory duties of ablution. What are the obligatory duties of ablution? Can anybody just put them in order? Go ahead.
Your intention?
Yes. Number two.
Washing your hands.
Washing your face. I'm talking about the obligatory duties.
The face,
washing the face,
the
hands
arms,
up to the elbows.
mask on the head,
Exactly. Number four.
and the feet.
5. Okay, and then
ترتيب.
the tertib.
Tertib, or making them in sequence. Yes, tertib. So it is intention. Number 2, washing the face, washing the hands up to the elbows. Number 4, wiping over the head. Number 5 is washing the feet. And number 6 is doing that in sequence. The proof for this is ayah number 6 in Surah Al-Ma'idah. The Bedouin came to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he asked him about ablution. And what does he say? What did the Prophet ﷺ says? The Prophet ﷺ referred him to the ayah of Surah Al-Ma'idah. So this hadith is very important hadith according to many scholars, including the Shafi'iyya and the Malikiyya, who said that even the madmada itself is not obligatory. It is only emphatically recommended. Sunnah mu'akkada. Why? My brothers and sisters, in our way of dealing with seemingly or apparently conflicting ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the best way to deal with them is to try to reconcile them. So the scholar said acting upon a hadith is better than cancelling it. You understand what I'm saying? So here we have two ahadith. The hadith under discussion in which the Prophet ﷺ said, فَلْيَنْتَثِرْ مَنْ وَإِذَا تَوَضَّأَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلْيَجْعَلْ فِي أَنْفِهِ مَاءً ثُمَّ لْيَنْتَثِرْ. So the Prophet ﷺ not recommended, he put a command here to inhale water into the nostrils and then to throw them away. So the Prophet ﷺ made it obligatory according to this hadith, right? But according to the hadith that he issued to the Bedouin, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? He referred him to the ayah. And the ayah, did the ayah mention cleaning the nose or making the madmada? Did the ayah mention that? No. So the scholars concluded that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ here, which included the command, it may be interpreted to mean just recommendation, or sunnah mu'akkada, being emphatically recommended. This is the case when the Prophet ﷺ commands doing something and he does the opposite. And he does the opposite. Like for example, you know, the Prophet ﷺ prohibited drinking while standing. And the Prophet ﷺ prohibited urinating while standing. But later the Prophet ﷺ was noticed that he drank while standing. And he urinated while standing according to the authentic hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So the scholar said that the prohibition here can be interpreted to mean just karaha, it's not haram. Okay? So when the Prophet ﷺ commands doing something and he does the opposite, or when the Prophet ﷺ commands something and then he has another statement to make it just mandub or sunnah, so we understand that the command here means what? Means istihbab, or it is interpreted to mean recommendation. So according to Malik and Al-Imam al-Shafi'i, rinsing the mouth and nose is an emphatically recommended act. It is not obligatory. The Sada, the Hanabila, they said that it's obligatory. They explained that the command in this hadith indicates a recommendation, not obligation. How? Because they based their view on the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said to the Bedouin, perform ablution in the way Allah commanded you. So the Prophet ﷺ referred him to the ayah, and the ayah didn't mention those two controversial things. What is the Prophet's way of making madmada and istinshaq? This is explained in the authentic hadith of Imam al-Bukhari, and we are going to explain later. But this hadith explained that the Prophet ﷺ performed istinshaq by inhaling water into his nose and then blowing it out. This is mentioned in a number of other authentic traditions reported by Bukhari and Muslim. And there is actually another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that he recommended exaggerating in inhaling water into the nose. And in a third hadith, the Prophet ﷺ explained the reason for this, that especially a person who wakes up, he exaggerates in inhaling water into his nostrils because the shaitan sleeps in that place. So, how to make istinshaq and madmada? The sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is the preferred view of al-Shafi'iyah according to the statement of Imam al-Nawawi, that a person takes 3 handfuls of water. He blows and inhales with the same blow of water. And then he gets water out of his nose by his left hand. Then he repeats it twice and 3 times. Again, a person takes a handful of water and he takes from the same handful of water a blow that he takes in his mouth, and he inhales the rest into his nose. It is difficult at the beginning, but this is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that he made 3 handfuls of water. According to the hadith of Abdullah ibn Zayd, he rinsed his mouth and nose with a single handful of water 3 times, which means that the Prophet ﷺ took 3 handfuls of water, and each time he cleansed his mouth and nose. And Bukhari advocates this view by giving the chapter title, Rinsing the Mouth and Inhaling Water into the Nose with the same handful of water. The Prophet ﷺ further said in this hadith, and if you use stones to clean your private parts, use an odd number. Istijmar, my brothers, and istinja. Istijmar is to use the pebbles. And the scholars have stipulated certain conditions for using pebbles. First of all, according to the Shafi'i school of law, they said the best way is to cleanse with pebbles and then to follow it up with water. And then comes water alone, and then comes pebbles alone. When I'm talking about pebbles, we're also talking about napkins and anything else which can remove the dirt or the filth, according to what the scholar said. So it may be there are certain conditions for the thing which is used, or the material which is used for cleaning. Number 1, it's able to clean. Number 2, it is not honored. It is not something which is honored. Like what? Like food, like, for example, a piece of bread, or like a piece of a book of knowledge, a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, or a verse of the Quran that is included in this paper, for example. And number 3, a person, when he is making this, he should not actually have anything extra coming up. So look, for example, when a person is wiping over, is cleaning himself, rain came and some water came to that place which was polluted. So in this case, the najasa is spread. The najasa is spread. Anyhow, this is not our discussion here, but the Prophet ﷺ said or recommended that a person uses an odd number. Or he uses an odd number of pebbles. So a person can use 3 napkins, or 5 napkins, or 7 napkins, or he have 7 sides of the same thing for cleaning himself. This is istijmar, and this is the way the Prophet ﷺ recommended in his hadith. And whenever one of you awakes from sleep, he should wash his hands before putting them in the container. This is the 3rd or the 4th point that the Prophet ﷺ referred in his hadith. The scholars, in fact, differed in interpreting the meaning of this segment of the hadith. According to the Maliki and the Shafi'i, they held the view that washing the hands is sunnah mu'akkada in all cases, because the Prophet ﷺ consistently did it. Because the Prophet ﷺ has consistently did it. Here, my brothers and sisters, the Imam al-Shafi'i and Imam Malik, how did they know that it is sunnah mu'akkada? Although the Prophet ﷺ has commanded them explicitly in the hadith. Can anybody answer this question? How did Imam Shafi and Imam Malik concluded this? Al-Imam Malik and Al-Imam al-Shafi'i, my brothers and sisters, concluded this because the Prophet ﷺ put a reason for commanding a believer to wash his hands. What's it? Because a person doesn't know where his hand was during his sleep, right? So if a person knows that where his hand was, or he is clean and there is no possibility of polluting his hand, so in this case, it doesn't become what? It doesn't become obligatory, and it's just a precocious matter. So the Prophet ﷺ made it as a precaution. Understand what I'm saying? So the Imam Malik and Shafi'i, they looked at the interpretation of the ayah. My brothers and sisters, when we have look at the text here, how do we deal with the text? And as I told you, that's one of our goals, is to know how to deduce from the hadith of the Prophet. Look, the default rule is to go by the literal meaning of the text, right? Right? Okay. Why should we move to interpretation? We move to interpretation because there is a context. There is a clue in the context. This clue makes us migrate the basic and primary meaning to a metaphorical or to any further interpretation. This is the view of Imam Malik and Imam Shafi'i, and this is a methodology that we should adopt actually in our understanding of religious texts. Number B is Abu Dawud al-Zahiri is literalist. So he relied on the apparent meaning of the hadith to conclude that washing hands before immersing them in a pollution vessel is obligatory after having slept either during day or during night. Imam Ahmad made a balance. He noticed that the Prophet ﷺ said, because a person doesn't know where does his hand slept during the night. So he took the word night and he said that's not only nocturnal sleeping, which is sleeping during night, which makes it obligatory, otherwise it's not. So the preferred opinion concerning this issue is that the command to wash the hands after awakening from sleep before dipping them into the vessel implies that it is recommended action for two reasons which I mentioned. The first reason is that the command in the hadith to wash both hands is explained by the other hadith in which a Bedouin asked the Prophet ﷺ, you remember the hadith of the Bedouin about a pollution, and the Prophet ﷺ did not instruct him to wash his hands before immersing them into the utensil. The second is the hadith contains an indication which diverts the imperative from its apparent meaning of command to that of recommendation, as I mentioned to you. This is briefly hadith number 4 in the hadith of Umdat al-Ahkam. Please, if you have any questions, go ahead before moving to hadith 5.
Sheikh, sorry, I had a couple of quick questions. Can hadith also be used as an evidence for the qullatayn being a small amount of water? So if the hands were to enter with najasa into a large amount of water, is it because he said utensil, which implies it's less than qullatayn?
Excellent question. It doesn't indicate the concept of qullatayn, but it refers to another issue, which is a little amount of water. If a little amount of water is polluted with najasa, whether you can see this najasa or not, you can smell this najasa or not, you can taste this najasa or not, in all cases, as long as the amount is small, it makes the water unclean, makes the water najis or impure. You understand what I'm saying? It makes the water impure. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ prohibited them of immersing their hands into the utensil out of fear that it may make it najis. So this is the limits of this text, as far as I know. But what about the qullatayn? The qullatayn has been proved by another hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith of Ibn Umar, in which the Prophet ﷺ said that when a water reaches the amount of qullatayn, and the qullatayn is almost 1/97 or 200 liters of water. It doesn't carry impurity. What is the meaning of the hadith of al-Qullatayn? Very briefly, hadith of al-Qullatayn means that when water is less than 200 liters, if it is less than 200 liters, any case of impurity that falls in it, whether you can see it or not, you can taste it or not, you can smell it or not, in all those cases, my brothers and sisters, it becomes what? It is najis. One word. You understand this? This is according to the Shafi'i scholars of Shafi'i and Hanabila. And if it is above the 200 liters, above the kullatayn, now we ask this question. Like a swimming pool. A swimming pool is more than 200 liters. You understand what I'm saying? So if a person urinates in it, some kids, they do that. Whether it is najis or not, it depends on if you see, you smell, or you what? If you see or smell or you taste najasa, so in this case it becomes impure. If not, it is still pure. You understand what I'm saying? So this is the case of the hadith al-Qullatayn, and Allah knows best.
Another question I had was, what's the qara'in to move the command of the wipes being odd number from something that is wajib to something that is less than wajib?
They are numerous, because those qara'in, we can explain them in usul al-fiqh. Those qara'in, they are textual. They are textual. Sometimes they are paratextual. Sometimes they are contextual. Sometimes they are occasional, related to the occasion of issuing the hadith. So these numerous qara'in that the a scholar or a jurist can read in the text or in other texts supporting this hadith to understand that it cannot be understood literally, can never be understood literally, and we have to migrate from the default meaning to a method to interpret it into, for example, into another meaning. Like, for example, when I explained for you وَيْلٌ لِلْأَعْقَابِ مِنَ النَّارِ, I conclude that there is an ellipsis here. Why? Because it doesn't make sense that only the heels will be tortured. A whole person will be tortured for this. But still, this confirmation is not sure 100%, so confirming that the ellipsis is sure. And this ellipsis is an interpretation, you understand? Because the literal is to stick to the literal meaning of the text. Okay, let us now move to hadith number 5, inshallah, because I think we still have only 20 minutes. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make barakah in our time to finish this hadith and the other. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: لا يبولن أحدكم في الماء الدائم الذي لا يجري ثم يغتسل منه، ولمسلم لا يغتسل أحدكم في الماء الدائم وهو جنوب. On the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, said, the Messenger of Allah said, one must not urinate in stagnant water, which is not running, then take a bath from it. According to the version related by Imam Muslim, one who is in a state of janaba must not take a bath in a stagnant water. Another version of Abu Hurairah, the Prophet ﷺ is reported as saying, one should not take a bath in still water while in a state of janaba. People asked Abu Hurairah, what should they do? Abu Hurairah said he should scoop it up with his hands. And on the authority of Jabir, who reported that the Prophet ﷺ prohibited urinating in stagnant water. My brothers and sisters, what you see from the title of this hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ prohibited urinating in stagnant water. And this prohibition is Maybe for two reasons, for two possible reasons. But you know, we have to read the context of the hadith to understand in which direction the hadith goes on. That you must not urinate in stagnant water. So we should ask ourselves this question: why the Prophet ﷺ prohibited us from urinating in stagnant water? Is it a prohibition or just a karaha? First of all, there are two possible reasons. Number one, it may be for some hygienic reason, because you know it is disgusting. It is something which is reluctant. People dislike it. They don't like it when a person stands up in front of everybody and he urinates in a stagnant water, or he answers the call of nature in that stagnant water, especially because it doesn't renew. So it may cause some health problems. So in this case, we should return back to the legal ruling of this, whether it is prohibited or disliked. And the second reason is, it may be because that person renders this water impure. You understand what I'm saying? It renders that water impure. So if we go with the second possibility, or the first possibility, can I ask you this question? Can we have any context in this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ to suggest any of those two meanings? Can we?
We might have
Anybody tell me?
context. Might have the context in the context of Medina, where they had a lot of swamp and marshy area.
But can we refer to the same text of the hadith? The Prophet ﷺ said, ثُمَّ لِيَغْتَسِلْ فِيهِ. So the Prophet ﷺ restricted that the person can take a bath in that water. You take a ghusl in that water. So in this case, this water is rendered impure. So it cannot remove the state of ritual purity of that person, right? You accept this?
No.
That's why
Yes.
the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, yes, it is mentioned in the text itself. So the text supported this meaning. That's why the scholars have been directed completely to this direction, and they had actually to build their theory on this concept. But they found out that the meaning of this hadith is general, my brothers, because this talks about stagnant water. So the question is further raised: how much water that we are talking about? Do we talk about minimum and maximum? So the Shafi'i scholars, they refer to what? Oh, they refer to the hadith of what? The hadith of the Qullatayn of Ibn Umar. Okay, according to the hadith of the Qullatayn, the hadith describes for us that there is a maximum and a minimum. So if this water goes beyond the two Qullatayn, if it goes beyond the two Qullatayn, so in this case, it is what? It is pure, no problem, as long as we don't have any change in this. So this hadith should be qualified by two ahadith. Number one, the hadith which talks about the hadith that we have just described right now, which talks about a person have had to wash his hands before immersing them in the utensil, because the water of a utensil is small, right? Which gives us an indication that a small amount of water, if it had any impurity, so it is rendered impure. And we should also go to the hadith of the Qullatayn to describe for us the maximum amount by which we can say that beyond this, the water can carry any impurities. And we should also go to a third hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is the hadith of the Bedouin, al-Arabi, who urinated on the ground of the masjid. Why should we refer to the hadith of al-Arabi? To differentiate between pouring water on the najasa and pouring the najasa on the water. You understand what I'm saying? There is a difference between pouring water into the najasa, because when the Prophet ﷺ commanded the Bedouin, he commanded them to throw water on the ground. The amount of the water on the which they poured, it was a bucket. It was a small amount on a huge amount of urine. Okay, so there is a difference between pouring water on the najasa or pouring the najasa into the water. We will benefit from this when we understand the issues of washing machines and how you put them in this case. But anyhow, I don't like to confuse you too much. We'll talk about the hadith of the Bedouin. But here, the key of understanding this hadith, my brothers and sisters, is that stagnant water is a general hadith. And it is specified by the hadith of Qullatain, which shows that there is a maximum amount of water. Okay? So there is actually a benefit, a very little, very good linguistic point here. Do you know the meaning of al-ma' al-da'im? What is the meaning of al-da'im in Arabic? Because the Prophet ﷺ, when he mentioned لا يبولن أحدكم في الماء الدائم, he said الذي لا يجري. He further explained it by saying that لا يبولن, no one of you should urinate in a stagnant water that doesn't run. Why the Prophet ﷺ said, confirm it and emphasize it by saying that doesn't run? Stagnant water runs? Does stagnant water run?
Separate from rivers?
What do you say?
Is it to separate from rivers and other bodies of water that flow?
Actually, this is a miracle in Arabic language. Arabic language has a word and its opposite. It has a meaning and its opposite at the same time. So ad-da'im is called in linguistics autonym. Autonym is a word which can have its opposite meaning. The word and its meaning and its opposite. Okay, so al-ma' ad-da'im means a running water, and also it means stagnant water. Okay, so ad-da'im is stagnant water and also running water. That's why the Prophet ﷺ had to add a phrase to show that this is the way. Anyhow, let us go to the fiqh of this hadith. According to Abu Hanifa, the Prophet's prohibition to urinate in stagnant water is a proof that if any type of impurity falls in such water, it's immediately rendered impure regardless of its quantity, as long as it is not greatly abundant. And according to the Hanafi scholars, they gave a description of how a water is abundant, because if you if you put your hand in one of its sides, it will shake the other side. So the other side of the pond, etc., will move. The water over there will move. So they said that's abundant, and it's almost abundant water is almost. They said that it is 4 feet or 7 feet width, depth, and this is a way. And according to Shafi'i scholars, the word water in this hadith includes water under 2 kullas. You understand? Because this hadith has been qualified by the hadith of Qullatain. Imam Ahmad also used the hadith of the 2 kullas and applied it to water in general, whether it is running or stagnant. So he explained that. In conclusion, the prohibition of urinating in stagnant water is unhygienic. This is what is concluded by Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, and this is another direction, as I mentioned, to understanding the text. And this is supported by the context of the hadith, which prohibits a person from urinating in stagnant water because he might later need to wash in it. Therefore, it is prohibited to urinate in stagnant water. And the hadith does not make mention of purity or impurity. And this is a direction, and this is an approach by some scholars. For sure, this is extended to defecation and this, according to, and it is one of the massive and major sins. The Prophet ﷺ, it is similarly repulsive to urinate or defecate close to ponds or swimming pools, because such places are frequently visited by people. And the Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اتقوا اللاعنين أو اللعانين. اللعانين means the people who curse. And al-la'anaini means the two things which bring up curses of people. Safeguard yourselves from the two matters that cause cursing upon the one who relieves himself in people's pathways and upon their places of shade. And also in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ prohibited urinating or defecating in close to springs of water, shadow, and also on people's roads because they actually bring the curses on them. It's a prohibition of damages to environment that may cause hygienic problems, as I mentioned in the commentary that you can, inshallah, refer to. Let me actually move to the last hadith of today's session, and before moving it to it, please, if you have any questions or any queries. Go
Sheikh,
ahead.
I have one question. You know how you
Sure.
said that you shouldn't urinate in stagnant or like running water? What about like toilet bowls? Like if you like, since there's water at the bottom of it.
There is no problem about it as long as a person, the Prophet ﷺ prohibited running in a shaq, in the ground. But this is not the same case. But the scholar said that if it causes some sprays of urine to go back on your clothes, on your body, so it is in this case it's not it's prohibit. We cannot say it's prohibited, but it is disliked. It is disliked if it causes that. Otherwise, it is not. So the scholar said that the reason the Prophet ﷺ prohibited urinating while standing, basically because it may cause some drops of urine to go back into a person's clothes or a person's body, so he has a najasa on them.
Jazakallahu khair.
Sheikh, does this hadith also cover the topic of al-ma' al-musta'mal?
Yes, according to the version of Imam Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ prohibited urinating in stagnant water that a person may use again for passing himself. So the scholars actually concluded that when a person uses water in removing a state of ritual purity, in removing a state of ritual impurity, whether it is major or minor, he is not supposed to use it again. For like what? Like for example, Brother Razaq, he used a container full of water on his body, and then it dropped from his body, separated, and it is still there. Can I use the same water for reaching my state of ritual impurity? According to the majority of the Muslim scholars, they said no, because it became as al-ma' al-musta'mal. What is your proof, ya Jumhur, ya our majority of scholars? They said the Prophet ﷺ never commanded the Sahaba to collect water again after making wudu of it, and the Prophet ﷺ and his Sahaba didn't have that sufficient water. So by consequence, we can conclude that from the practice of the Prophet ﷺ that using water in this case is not permissible, and it doesn't remove the state of ritual impurity. Okay, so we confront them with other hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ, like the hadith of Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu ta'ala, hadith of Abu Juhayfa radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam appeared to people and he started making wudu. So the Sahaba start to snatch and to pick up the water of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and wipe that over their bodies. فَمِن نَاضِحٍ وَنَائِلٍ. They said, فَمِن نَاضِحٍ وَنَائِلٍ. So the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ used to do this out of seeking blessings of the Prophet ﷺ. But anyhow, the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, it may be interpreted that they didn't make wudu of it. But anyhow, they refer to another hadith of Jabir radiallahu anhu, and this is a hadith which talked about a person who had a state of envious eye. You remember he had an envious eye, so he invited his brother to make wudu of the vessel and to give him the water to make wudu from, so that this envious eye may be removed. And this hadith is mentioned in Sahih Imam Muslim. Anyhow, the issue of the hadith under discussion can be used as a proof for the prohibition of using used water and removing a state of ritual impurity, simply because the Prophet ﷺ made the reason of the prohibition that he mentioned in his hadith. He put the condition that this is basically because a person may make ghusl in this water again. So the scholars concluded that, but this is not a unanimous agreement among scholars. The scholars of hadith, actually, some of them, I think, like Shawkani and others, and Ahnaf, they actually permit the using of used water actually in removing a state of ritual impurity. And by the used water that I would like to explain for you, the water which has been used to remove a state of ritual impurity. Like, for example, if a person is making wudu, I'm asking you this question, and he washed his hands up to the elbows one time. So the water which dropped from this is called what? Musta'mal or not?
No.
Asking. It is musta'mal. This is used water. Why? Because it removed the state of ritual impurity of your hands. Okay, if you wash it for the second and the third time,
No.
do you
No.
regard this musta'mal? No. Why? Because it is already, the state of ritual impurity has been removed by the first wash. You understand? So this is a technical point that we can explain in fiqh, inshallah.
Sheikh, I had a question regarding the
Sure.
purity of water. So, if there is enough najasa within a container of water such that is no longer tahir, can you bring in more water that is tahir to mix with the water? Would that change the status of the water at all?
Yes, yes, yes. The water has a quality that it pushes away najasa. If you increase it to the amount of kullatayn, it can remove the najasa. It
Yeah.
can remove the najasa. And it can also change its quality from being used to a pure and purifying. Okay?
Sheikh, I had a question.
Sure.
Sheikh, wouldn't mustamal water be when you use the water for the whole of wudu? Because I thought it was for the whole of wudu, and then the water from the first time, so first washing for all of the wudu, that would be mustamal, not just a part of it. Will you please
Not
elaborate
from,
on that?
not only from one limb of the body.
Yeah, I thought it was like after the complete wudu, the first time.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on a technical issue also in fiqh, whether to regard each separate limb as having a state of hadath. So you intend to remove the hadath from every single limb separately or collectively. You understand?
Yep.
So it is a technical issue. Nah. Jazakumullah khairan. I think we will stop at this point. I think we had received a question from Hidayah, as I said. Let me see. With regards to bathing post janaba, is it that you shouldn't use stagnant water in general, or stagnant water that has been contaminated with filth, urine, etc.? Yes, it is. It is permissible to use stagnant water, even unless it has been polluted. Unless it has been polluted. Now, I think, my brothers and sisters, we will stop at this point, inshallah, and then we will have a break for just 10 minutes, if you allow me, because I have to make Salat al-Asr. Okay? Then I return back. This is the time for our Asr.